All right, everybody, welcome back to Thoughts and Coffee. I'm actually very excited to talk about today's episode because this is just an extremely interesting, fascinating topic. Before we get into that, if you're new to Thoughts and Coffee, just take the time whenever you listen to this to just kind of chill out, relax. Don't think about the stresses later in the day or in the past or whatever, and drink some coffee, some tea, whatever you got, and just kind of learn something new here, something you can apply to your own life, something you can think about deeply. That is the point of this podcast, just to kind of let go and relax for, a few minutes, 15 to 30 minutes, it doesn't really go longer than that. My choice of beverage is a coffee. I'm just going with the Starbucks, brewed it myself, nothing too fancy. I don't go with that really fancy foreign stuff, Nothing like Jules and Pulp Fiction will drink the serious gourmet shit. Don't got any of that right now, so gotta stick with this, but it is quite delicious. That being said, the topic I'm gonna discuss today is from a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell that I read this month. So I read two books this month, which is actually pretty good for me, so I'm quite proud. But I did read Outliers, which is probably one of the best books I've read in my entire life. I mean, I really don't know if anything can top it this year because I do have a lot of books planned to read. The basic premise of Outliers is it basically talks about successful people measured in a very unordinary and unorthodox scale. So it talks about basically how people are successful outside of the whole idea of working hard, which of course does play a part into it, but this talks about very strange measures of success, and it's fascinating, and it's all really researched well and proven, and there's just amazing chapters in this. I think everyone should read this book. It really makes you it gives an outlook on how you can kind of apply your life, especially if you're thinking about a certain passion or career or whatever, that you want to aim toward. This book, I would say, gives an amazing outlook on how you can aim for that in a different, more easier way of being successful. It's definitely worth pick up. It's called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. But there's one chapter toward the end of the book, one of the last few chapters, I want to talk about specifically that really was interesting, and it's called Marita's Bargain, which will probably be the name of this episode. Marita was a 12-year-old girl living in New York. And she was part of a special school program that she had the opportunity to get into, which called the KIPP program. And the KIPP program was established for the purpose of trying to get poorer communities of minority children, people who have maybe a single mother and father figure isn't around. A big portion of the students accepted are African American and Hispanic. And the idea is that this was going to be a special program that's free. It's publicly funded, I believe. It's not a private school or anything. And they're trying to get poorer kids with a lot of disadvantages into a very special school program that will teach them real values of hard work and kind of get them very passionate, working very hard so that they could come out of that situation very strong. And of course, that's the idea of a general public school, but the KIPP was really different. It was a very intense school to get in, and you had to be really, really, honestly, just incredibly bright and strong to handle the sort of pressure that this school offers, because it is insane. I mean, I when I read this book, I couldn't even believe like the strength this little girl had. Because I'm being honest, I don't know if I could have handled this. I definitely couldn't have handled this at her age, and even now, it's for adults. This would be difficult. But this school program was really beneficial, and it really sheds light on how I've been thinking about my schedule. Because I've been pretty busy, but I could always be busier. And this little girl in this book definitely showed me as a great example of that. I could really prioritize my time more. So, I want to read from the book. I have the book right here. I want to read her actual schedule every day that she had to go through in order to really make it in the school. She got in, and by the way, just speaking of getting in, extraordinarily difficult to get in, not even because they're like oh, you have to take a test and pass. It's like it's really just about, it's like a lottery ticket win. Were you lucky enough? Call it fate, call it luck and pure chance, whatever it is. This could be either case, I suppose, but it's a lottery win ticket to get into this school. Not anyone can just go, and they only have a select few. It's literally just, it's like pulling the Powerball. So anyway, I want to point that out too, because a lot of this book talks about success in the forms of actually being born in the right place at the right time. That's a really big portion of this book, and it's fascinating to read. But to get into it, I want to read you her schedule, and I'm going to read an excerpt from the book, and you have to keep in mind, and the book allows me to know this, Marita is 12 years old. Okay? Keep that in mind. This is a 12-year-old girl. I wake up at 5:45 a.m. to get a head start. I brush my teeth, shower, get some breakfast at school if I'm running late. Usually I get yelled at because I'm taking too long. I meet my friends Diana and Steven at the bus stop, and we get the number 1 bus. I leave school at 5 p.m. If I don't lollygag around, then I will get home around 5:30. Then I say hi to my mom really quickly and start my homework. And if it's not a lot of homework that day, it will take me 2 to 3 hours, and I'll be done around 9 p.m. Or if we have essays, then I will be done like 10 p.m. or 10:30 p.m. Sometimes my mom makes me break for dinner. I tell her I want to go straight through, but she says I have to eat. So around 8, she makes me break for dinner for like half an hour, and then I get back to work. Then usually after that, my mom wants to hear about school, but I have to make it quick because I have to get in bed by 11 p.m. So I get all my stuff ready, and then I get into bed. I tell her all about the day and what happened, and by the time we are finished, she's on the brink of sleeping, so that's probably around 11:15. Then I go to sleep, and the next morning, we do it all over again. We are in the same room, but it's a huge bedroom, and you could split it into 2, and beds on other sides. Me and my mom are very close. That's a 12-year-old girl that does all of that. Her day begins at 5:45 a.m. and ends at 11:15 p.m. So she's averaging 6 hours of sleep a night, which is crazy. It's crazy. And she has to share a 1-bedroom apartment with her mom, so it's not like she ever gets her own privacy. I mean, she doesn't seem to be complaining about it, but just to note the strength of this kid is absolutely incredible. And the thing about the KIT program is it works. Their success rates for the students leaving are very high. And here's why. Based on what I've been reading here, again, this book, I'm not going to do it justice unless you read the book, because you have to factor in an amazing amount of success that the rest of the book covers that leads up to what Marita is doing. For example, one thing Marita has definitely done, because she started at 12 years old, is she's probably hit about 10,000 hours of practice and experience in some of these classes and hobbies that she did at school, like music. And that's a big chapter of the book, that they found that people who hit, for whatever weird reason, if you hit actual 10,000 hours of practice in some sort of field, like music or something, it had an amazing success rate, which of course might be obvious, but 10,000 seemed to be an actual magic number related in this book. So you could the reason I bring that up is you could apply that chapter to what's going on here with Marita. And with the 10,000 hour rule, that's very difficult to achieve in anything. It's the best way to do it is if you start a hobby as a kid and you stick to it for a long time, because when you're a kid you have less priorities. As an adult you could still hit it, but it's very difficult. So there is an advantage of starting something as a kid in forms of hobby, but that's not the point I'm bringing up. I'm just leveling this out. How she can handle this sort of pressure is still incredible, because that's not easy to do, especially with 6 hours of sleep at night around, every day. 12 years old. God, I mean, I got 6 hours of sleep or less every night in middle school, and I wasn't even working hard. I was just staying up late talking to friends. I mean, it really made me realize how much time I wasted. Not to make myself feel guilty or anyone else that's listening, but it is incredible to kind of put that in perspective. But with Marita, something to point out is she actually had some free time that the chapter doesn't talk about. And that's what I'm going to bring up. Now, I use free time loosely. When I think of free time, I think about being at my house, laying down on my phone or watching TV or something. That's what I think free time. But free time, really, it can be summed up in something else. Her commute to school and back is a little less than a half hour. So, like she even said here, where was it? I leave school at 5 p.m. and if I don't lollygag around, then I'll get home around 5:30. So it's half hour, give or take. Which means that she takes her probably about a half hour to get to the KIPP program school that she's going to from in the morning. That's an hour of a task that could be completed while you're waiting. Now, in fairness to Marita, she didn't mention this, but I would probably use that time to sleep. But this little kid is a superhero. I mean, legitimately. But I bring this up because, imagine listening to a podcast like this one. Or something much better. But you listen to a podcast on finance, on business, on philosophy, on religion, on responsibility, whatever it is. Or you read a book in that time while you're commuting back and forth. You could read. That's an hour of reading. Or an hour of listening to a podcast or two. Or a little bit of both. I calculated an extra hour in that schedule. Now, not easy to do, especially with how overwhelmed she is in the story, but she seems to handle it very strongly. And of course, if you had a schedule like Marita's, there's nothing wrong with even chilling out on the bus and just kind of, pondering about life for a bit with a schedule like that. That's completely fine. My point in this is I really noticed the ability of human strength and how strong people are. And you don't have to be a 12-year-old girl who grew up in a poor neighborhood with a single mom in a one-bedroom apartment to realize that. You don't have to have everything working against you to realize, like, oh, I'm special. Oh, I can do this. Because she is just an average kid at the end of the day. But she won the lottery in terms of this special school. And what this chapter outlines is that she utilized that opportunity and made it work as much as possible. She thought about the long-term game. And it worked. But I found it interesting that the part we didn't cover is there's that one more hour of a commute to and back from school. And you can always utilize your time in an amazing way. It's definitely not easy. I definitely don't do it. Most people don't. And I'm not even blaming her for not doing this because this is an amazing... I don't have this schedule right now. But I've been thinking about her schedule overall, and I want to have that schedule. Maybe not as overwhelming and intense because I have that freedom to, but there is a benefit to it because you hit so many milestones with that. One thing I want to point out too that this KIPP school did that was really smart and that I like is, it's a longer school day. But one thing that they did is in their math classes, I believe, were all 2 hours long, and the rest of the classes were shorter. And they said that I think the statistic was, I'm not going to look for it in the chapter, but I want to say that they had kids that would come in struggling with math, and when they would leave the school, they were 60% better at math, and they can handle a lot of the complex problems. And one of the reasons of that is because they made the math classes an extra hour long, and they wanted to really make sure that kids were getting it. They think that the rapid fire, the public schools and even private schools, to an extent, I went to a private school, a really shitty one, but they don't want to rapid fire the learning when it comes to mathematics. And I can tell you for certain, I struggled with math so bad. I failed math 2 or 3 times. A lot of that had to do with A, I struggled, B, I had a shitty teacher, and 3, I didn't give a shit. So it wasn't a good combination. I didn't take a lot of this stuff seriously. But it was very difficult for me because you're like, okay, yeah, do math, and you solve these building blocks and these equations, and then the next day it was on to something new. And in math, it was that subject we all remember. If you got sick one day, you were screwed for the entire week. If you were like me, and you didn't want to put in the extra responsibility to relearn yesterday's material, you were pretty much screwed. It was the one subject where that happened. But in this example, with the KIPP program, they got to work extra hard at it because they basically gave enough time for all the students to really understand what was going on. every kid was going to come out of that class for the most part knowing what to do because they had the extra time to make sure everyone was learning. They reference one kid in the chapter that it took him like 20 minutes to solve a pretty complex equation, and the teacher had the class help him. They were all trying to figure out with him. Like, it wasn't an obvious answer. It wasn't like this one kid was struggling and he was just up there by himself not being able to figure it out. They were all working together on it. But the moral of the story is they were all able to spend 20 minutes of class time on this equation. I mean, my math class was like 40 minutes long. 20 minutes on one equation, that's not going to happen. But they had the time to really explain and learn, and so the kids came out much stronger because there was a community effort into it, and there was a real care about mathematics specifically and the complexity of it. But I think what happened too psychologically is that putting these kids in this rhythm of hard work, knowing they have to work hard to get into the school, to sustain that lottery ticket membership they won. But they also took it home with them. At least in Marita's case, she was a one of a kind and really took it home with her. And so the moral of the story is this. Not only should you have, I know. Not only should you have Marita's schedule. Remember, the chapter is called Marita's Bargain. Why? Because this is what her bargain was. She had to sacrifice a lot of her life to do this sort of stuff. Not only do you need her schedule, I'm going to go a step further and say that extra hour in there is so important. That commute to the bus and back. Now, of course, you're not in the same situation as her. Maybe some of you aren't even going to school right now. Maybe some of you work full-time, have kids, whatever it is. But if you can make a schedule like hers or even more intense, and when I mean intense enough that you can handle it. Not saying you have to necessarily go to bed for 6 hours, 5 hours, whatever. You can have a normal sleep, still 7-8 hours. But if you make an intense plan and schedule toward your passion, your career, your schoolwork, whatever it is that you have, and you even find those little moments where you're like, well, I do take the subway every day or the bus, and you can find some time to even be productive there, whether it's listening to a podcast, reading a book, whatever it is. That is the best way to hit 10,000 hours, not only in one passion, in something, and that takes a long time. Don't get me wrong, that takes forever. But you can really organize the hell out of your life and put the things that matter the most at a forefront, and that you go to bed feeling like you've executed everything in an extremely proper and important way. So that was Marita's bargain. Sacrifice a lot of what I like to do now for stuff I know I'm going to love to do in the future. And that's going to shape me to be a person of complete success and pure, outstanding value in the world. But her story in particular blew me away. It's made me think about my life so much. If she can do it, you can do it, and you should do it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Thoughts and Coffee. I will see you all next week. Be sure to like this video on YouTube and subscribe for more content. Every Sunday at 9 a.m. is a new episode of Thoughts and Coffee. Thank you.